Good morning. After we found our seats, welcome to our press conference today, the last one before the summer break of the Parliament, then to start mid-July. I hand over to our Group President, Gianni Pittella.
Grazie, buongiorno a tutti.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to touch on 3 questions in my introduction, followed by questions. So on the question of migration, as we've said so many times in the past, Italy simply cannot deal with this phenomenon alone, and every day the problem is growing in scale. Nor can we leave Greece alone. The problem pertains not only to rescue operations, but also, and above all, the reception of refugees and migrants. The situation has become unsustainable. I'd like to use a word which I don't normally use, which is shame. The situation is shameful. Italy and the Italians are being abandoned. They're being expected to deal with all these migrants on their own with no support. The other EU countries are refusing to share this responsibility, and they're turning their back on us. Immigration and migration is not a problem, an issue which only concerns Italy. It concerns Europe as a whole. So we are actually stupefied by the comments made by Macron and the Austrian defense minister regarding the closing down of borders, ports, and the announcements made by the Austrian defense minister, at least, that they would deploy the army to defend their borders. So the question I would ask, okay, it's slightly rhetorical, but there's a serious note behind it. Are these countries European or not? If they're members of the European Union, they have to shoulder and share their responsibilities. It's not enough just to try to burnish their European credentials. We've all heard what Macron says about Europe. But there's no point in just flexing muscles and making empty statements. We want practical proof, consistent action. So there are 2 dimensions to this problem, the external and the internal EU dimension. As far as the external dimension is concerned, the Italian government, supported by Ms. Mogherini, has been trying to reinforce border controls both from Libya and on the southern border of Libya, with a view to dismantling trafficking of human beings, as well as supporting the activities of NGOs. We want to establish a code of conduct which should be broadly supported. But, a brief parenthesis, on that specific issue, we won't fall into the trap of getting the wrong target. Nobody can suggest that NGOs are responsible for trafficking human beings. The vast majority of those NGOs are actually plucking them out of the sea. So let's not displace the problem. So what we're actually trying to do is we're confusing the people who start fires with the firemen. It's organised crime, mafia, who are organising the trafficking of human beings, not NGOs. Equally, on the domestic front, on the internal level, I've referred beforehand to France, Spain, other countries and ports must be made available for reception facilities. I find it incomprehensible that Italy is expected to take in these ships on a daily basis containing hundreds or thousands of migrants, and those ships can't go to other European ports. Who can explain that to me? How is it possible that every day 10,000 people reach Italy, and Italy is expected to let in all those people on its own? At the same time, the other countries want to close down their borders with Italy to prevent them travelling on. And then we talk about resettlement, relocation. So things have to change. We have to promote stability in Libya, and when the time comes, we have to revisit Dublin. That's a responsibility of the governments, of course, not the Parliament. But unfortunately, the government seems to be refusing to even open this file. I would like to comment on this. We're not talking just about Italy and Italian democracy. We're talking about democracy in Europe as a whole. So Europe's very good when it comes to forcing people to respect their rules on deficits, but it's more than just that. Europe should also be respecting the rules of solidarity. And if we don't that, the European Union ceases to exist. We will lose the very mortar which holds together the European edifice, our DNA, if you like. The second point is country-by-country reporting. At 8:30, I attended the demonstration organised outside the Parliament by a group of NGOs who want to state their opposition to this report, calling us to vote against. We would like to avoid the possibility of a derogation which would enable major multinationals to circumvent the rules. We need to have a clear outlook, the clear prospect of legislation which will ensure that major multinationals are obliged to report on where they generate profits and revenue. That's essential because we need clear information as to where they should and are paying tax. Otherwise, we're opening the door to tax evasion. So I sincerely hope that our friends in the EPP will step back from their commitment to roll out further deregulation, which is designed to undermine the efforts we're making to improve transparency. Finally, the Parliamentary Committee on Terrorism, on the fight against terrorism. As I've said before, we believe that one of the main problems which we've faced in Europe in terms of terrorism, one of the root causes, if you like, of these repeated attacks is a lack of cooperation and sharing of information between secret services. Colleagues from the Lega Nord or other anti-European parties constantly pointing the finger at the refugees who they suspect are hiding terrorists. That's not the problem. Let's not just make these underhand comments about these poor people. The real problem, let me just cite the example, that the French secret services, for example, don't talk to their counterparts in Germany. I'm just taking two random examples. And none of them actually communicate properly with Europol. The director of Europol just told me just a year ago that only 8 European countries actually engage in exchange of information. And clearly that plays into the hands of terrorists. If we aren't able to exchange information, we can't predict and warn about terrorist attacks. So we're still collecting signatures, but we want to put forward a proposal regarding this committee, that we need a committee of inquiry. We need a committee of inquiry which will focus on all these issues, and such a body is something which we would very much welcome. Thank you, Gianni.
Your questions? Everything was very clear? Yes, please.
Gallavotti Aidan Kronos in Italian, if I may. Il Presidente della Commissione.
The President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, described this morning how angry he was to see so few members of the Parliament present for the debate on the Maltese presidency. What would your comment say on that?
Penso esattamente questo.
I agree. Although I would say that Juncker should sometimes be a bit careful about the words he uses. I myself couldn't go to plenary. I was meeting the Commissioner. That was the only slot available to the Commissioner. I think all of us clearly have to do our job as MEPs. We have to attend plenary sittings of the European Parliament. In particular, when we have heads of state and government present. And to be quite blunt with you, I don't think that Juncker should just be angry with the Parliament when it comes to turnout. When our honourable friends, members of the European Council, meet without taking decisions on issues such as migration, I think Juncker would be better advised to direct his ire at them, and he could actually stand up and walk out. That, I think, would be a useful and efficient gesture. More useful than what he did this morning. Whenever we have major events, votes on major files, members of the European Parliament are there and present.
Monsieur le Président, un mot sur le rapport.
Just a word on the Turkey report. Just a question. Do you have a position post-Raqqa?
La posizione è chiara.
Our position is clear. We drafted a resolution. Our rapporteur Katapiri drafted it. And I think you're very much aware of what's in our position. We've also supported the idea of Turkey membership of the European Union. But we really are very, very, very concerned by ongoing events in Turkey before and after the referendum. Turkey seems to be turning into a country whose main interest is to build new prisons, to detain thousands and thousands of people who often don't even know why they've been arrested. So the whole question of freedom of information, the idea of a free press, the detention of lawyers, activists, journalists. So I don't think that the conditions are fulfilled for us to reinitiate negotiations. We sincerely hope this will change. We're not against the people of Turkey. We're very much in favour of a democratic process would eventually lead to Turkey joining the European Union. But if Erdogan continues in the direction of travel, I think we'll soon be talking about an illiberal regime. Any more questions? In that case, thank you very much, and I wish you all a good session. Thank you.